The moment I stepped out, she pointed at my Rolls-Royce and called the cops. "Stolen," she said, accusing me right there in front of everyone. I stood still, letting her dig herself deeper while the whole neighborhood watched phones out recording. What she didn't know was I wasn't just some kid with a nice car. I'd built everything I had from the ground up. This wasn't just a car. This was a challenge, and she was about to learn that judging me would cost her everything. But the real question was, how far would I go to make her regret it? Lorraine Hargrove didn't hesitate. As soon as I stepped out of my car, she was on me, her eyes cold, her clipboard gripped tight in her hands like a weapon. "Who are you, and what are you doing here?" she demanded, voice sharp, dripping with suspicion. She didn't introduce herself, didn't ask if I was new to the neighborhood. No, she just assumed. Her gaze flicked from the Rolls-Royce to my hoodie and jeans, then back to the car, as if trying to figure out how someone like me could possibly afford it. "This car doesn't belong here," she muttered under her breath, but loud enough for me to hear. I could feel the tension in the air, the weight of her judgment pressing down on me. She wasn't just questioning my car, she was questioning my right to even be in this neighborhood. "It's my car," I said calmly, not giving her the satisfaction of seeing me react. But Lorraine didn't stop there. She took out her phone and dialed 911, her finger pointing at me like I was the criminal. "Suspicious individual," she said into the phone, driving a stolen vehicle. What she didn't know was that her assumptions were about to be the biggest mistake of her life. She thought she was in control, calling the shots, enforcing her own version of who belonged here. But I wasn't the one she needed to worry about. She was. It started small. Lorraine was a pro at this subtle but deliberate. A few days after the incident, I was getting the mail when I saw her standing across the street, clipboard in hand, scribbling something down. She wasn't even trying to be discreet about it. Just a quick glance, then a note, then another glance. I ignored it at first, thinking maybe she was just doing her job, whatever that job was, in a place like this. But it didn't stop there. The next day, a letter arrived from the HOA, an inspection notice. Routine, it said, just to make sure everything was in compliance with community standards. I knew better. There it was, right at the bottom. Failure to comply will result in a $500 fine. I wasn't stupid. This wasn't about compliance, it was about control. They were watching me now. They were setting up a reason to make my life harder. I tossed the letter into the trash, but it didn't stop there. More notes appeared. On my doorstep, on my car, little comments, reminder to keep the driveway clear, even though it was always clear. Parking restrictions, in effect my car was parked in my own driveway. The passive-aggressive whispers started to pick up speed. Lorraine and her crew were circling, just waiting for me to slip up. It got personal fast. A few days later, as I was unloading boxes from my car, I noticed Lorraine standing on her balcony again, phone pressed to her ear, eyes fixed on me. I waved nothing. Not even a polite nod, just cold, hard judgment. Then I saw it. She was taking pictures of me. My car, my house. Every time I turned my back, I could feel her watching. A week later, another letter arrived, this time from the HOA board. A complaint had been filed about noise disturbances. I almost laughed. Noise, from me. The letter accused me of disturbing the peace by playing music too loudly during the evening. But I never played music. I didn't even own a stereo system. This was the beginning of the real game. Lorraine had already escalated things. She was trying to paint me as a problem in this perfect neighborhood. I went out to confront her, but by the time I reached her house, she was gone. I stood in her front yard, staring at the empty porch, and realized what she was doing. She was using the system to label me as a threat. It wasn't about complaints. It was about building a case, a paper trail, for a fight she was already winning in her mind. The real damage came next. I was in the process of making my house feel like home, getting furniture, personalizing my space when things started to go missing. Small things at first, a tool left out in the garage, a bag of yard tools I'd just bought. It was subtle, but it started happening regularly. Then, one morning, I walked outside to find my mailbox destroyed. Not just knocked over, smashed into pieces, as if someone had driven by and run it over on purpose. At first I thought it was a freak accident, but then the pattern clicked. It was her, Lorraine. She was trying to intimidate me, testing my patience, seeing how much I'd tolerate. I could feel the eyes of the entire neighborhood on me, the subtle whispers that got louder every day. They had assumed I didn't belong here, and now they were going to make sure I didn't feel welcome. I called the police to file a report, but the officer just shrugged it off. "Not much we can do, sir. Maybe try a security camera." That was all the response I got. Another dead end. But Lorraine, she was enjoying it. Every step, every little thing was a step toward making me leave. The situation got worse when Lorraine pulled out the big guns, the police. It was a Sunday morning when it happened. I was sipping coffee by the window when I saw two patrol cars pull up outside my house. Lorraine was standing at the edge of the driveway, clipboard in hand, watching as the officers approached. She'd made another call, this time about a suspicious individual in the neighborhood. I opened the door before they could knock, stepping outside to greet them. Officer Callahan, the older one, gave me a nod of acknowledgement, while his partner, Officer Brennan, looked me over with a more cautious stare. Lorraine was already talking, her voice rising with every word. "He's been causing disturbances, making people uncomfortable," she said, pointing toward my house. "I don't know what he's up to, but it's not right." I stood still, keeping my tone calm, but my voice carried weight. "I don't know what you've been told, officers, but I'm the owner of this house, and I have every right to be here." I showed them the papers, the contracts, the proof, but Lorraine wasn't done. She kept pushing, accusing me of things I didn't do, painting me as a threat. The officers were quiet, taking it all in. Then Officer Callahan spoke. "Ma'am, unless you have evidence, this is just a complaint, and accusations based on assumptions aren't enough." Lorraine's face tightened, but she didn't argue. The officers looked at each other. "We're done here," Callahan said, his voice final. "You're free to go, Mr. Sterling." As the police turned to leave, Lorraine stood there, her eyes burning with fury. She had lost. But I knew this wasn't over yet. The final straw came the following week. I had just finished an early morning workout when I saw her walking across the street again, clipboard in hand. This time, she was accompanied by two other board members. They had come for a confrontation. Lorraine's expression was smug. "We need to verify your vehicle's VIN number." "HOA policy," she said. "All cars parked overnight must be registered with the security system." I crossed my arms, keeping my voice level. "That's not in the bylaws, Lorraine. I read them before I moved here." She refused to back down. "It's a new policy," she said, trying to control the situation. "And if you don't cooperate, we'll escalate it to the authorities." I stared at her for a moment, then turned and walked into my house. I wasn't going to let her bait me into a fight. Not now. Not after everything that had already happened. I locked the door behind me, took a breath, and decided it was time to fight back in a way she wouldn't expect. I knew I had the legal resources to push back. Lorraine had pushed me too far, and now she'd see that her assumptions had consequences. The HOA meeting was packed. There was no small talk, no pleasantries, just a lot of uncomfortable energy in the room. Lorraine sat at the front table, her face pale, the arrogance gone. Now she was a cornered animal, trying to hold on to whatever control she had left. The vice president, a tall man in a well-tailored suit, stood at the front, scanning the room before clearing his throat. "Thank you all for coming. We've called this emergency meeting to address serious allegations regarding our HOA president, Lorraine Hargrove." The room went silent. Lorraine's eyes shot to me, and I could feel her trying to regroup. It was clear that whatever she thought was going to happen today wasn't going to go as planned. After a moment, the vice president continued. "After careful review and consultation with legal counsel, the board has voted 4-1 to request the immediate resignation of Lorraine Hargrove." Gasps echoed around the room. The vice president wasn't done, though. "These allegations involve actions taken by Lorraine based on assumptions, not facts. Actions that have hurt a member of our community." He motioned toward me. "We have determined that Lorraine's conduct has not only harmed Mr. Sterling, but also others in the past." Lorraine sat there, expression frozen, her fingers clenched tightly on the table. She could barely keep her composure as the room began to buzz with whispers. Her reign was slipping away, and she knew it. The vice president moved to the next slide on the projector screen, the investigation results. "Let's make one thing clear," the vice president continued. "The car in question, it's legally owned, the house legally purchased. Mr. Sterling has all the documentation to back up his claims." Lorraine shifted uncomfortably. Her smug confidence had been replaced by uncertainty. The vice president didn't stop there. "We also learned of similar incidents in the past. Lorraine has targeted other residents based on their background, making assumptions about them, their wealth, and their ability to afford their homes. These actions, while previously handled privately, have now come to light." A collective murmur rippled through the room. Lorraine was caught in a web of lies, and everyone could see it. She tried to hold her ground, but the evidence was overwhelming. People were starting to realize that this wasn't an isolated incident. Lorraine's eyes flickered to me, but I didn't flinch. I stood there, calm and collected, knowing that the truth was finally coming to light. Her time was up. Lorraine, desperate for control, stood up, her voice trembling. "I did what I thought was best for the community," she said, trying to defend her actions. "I was trying to protect Riverside Oaks from people who don't belong here." I stepped forward, cutting her off. "You weren't protecting anyone, Lorraine. You were trying to control people who didn't look the way you wanted them to. You assumed I was a criminal because I don't fit your idea of what someone like me should look like." Her face twisted with frustration, but I didn't stop. "You've been doing this for years, targeting anyone who doesn't fit your narrow definition of acceptable." The room was heavy with tension, but Lorraine wasn't ready to back down. She opened her mouth to speak, but I wasn't finished. "You didn't just accuse me of something. No, you tried to destroy my reputation based on nothing but your assumptions." The vice president, now fully in control, spoke up. "Lorraine, you've crossed a line. You've hurt people. You've made baseless accusations, and you've used your position to push others out of the community." Lorraine's hands trembled as she reached for her papers, but she couldn't deny the truth anymore. "You're done," the vice president added. "Effective immediately, we accept your resignation." The room erupted into murmurs, some of disbelief, others of relief. Lorraine's grip on the table tightened, but there was nothing left for her to do. Her position was no longer secure. I didn't feel victorious. The damage had already been done, but I knew I had made a stand. I had made sure that this wasn't going to happen again, not to me, not to anyone else. The meeting was over, but the tension still lingered in the air. Lorraine's resignation was official, but it didn't feel like a win, not yet. As I made my way out of the room, some neighbors approached, eyes downcast. An older man extended his hand to me, his voice low. "I didn't know," he said. "I'm sorry for what happened." I accepted his handshake. "It's done. But it shouldn't have happened at all." More people came forward, some apologizing, others offering quiet support, but there were still plenty who avoided eye contact, uncomfortable with their own complicity. The damage Lorraine had caused wasn't easily undone, and now they were seeing it for themselves. Some expressions were remorseful, while others seemed unsure how to navigate the change. But no matter how many apologies came my way, I knew the truth. Lorraine's actions had exposed the cracks in this community, and those cracks wouldn't disappear overnight. This wasn't just about me, it was about what this neighborhood had allowed to happen and whether they were willing to face it. The next few days were busy. My lawyer quickly moved forward with the formal complaint. It wasn't just about defamation anymore, it was about addressing the systemic problem that Lorraine represented. Her actions had hurt more than just me, and the other families who'd suffered at her hands now had an opportunity to speak out. The second letter was sent to Lorraine with a detailed breakdown of her actions and the consequences. The HOA board, though shaken, agreed to work on policy changes. There would be an independent audit of all their practices, and mandatory bias training was scheduled for every board member. I wasn't interested in revenge, I wanted accountability. If Lorraine thought an apology would fix this, she was mistaken. Real change needed to happen, and the first step was making sure the system couldn't be manipulated again. 2 weeks later, I received an email from my lawyer. Lorraine had agreed to the terms. She would pay restitution to the families who came forward, and the HOA would implement new reforms. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was progress. Then, I got a message from one of the families that Lorraine had previously targeted. They were willing to talk finally. The Hispanic couple who'd been driven out by Lorraine's accusations had agreed to share their story. It felt like a weight lifted off me. I hadn't just fought for myself. I had helped others reclaim their voice. The HOA's public apology had been a start, but I knew it wouldn't be enough. But seeing the changes unfold gave me hope. The reforms were happening, and slowly the neighborhood was starting to recognize that discrimination had no place here. A few days after the story broke, the HOA held another meeting. This time, it wasn't about a crisis, it was about building a better future. They presented the new policies, no profiling and anonymous reporting system for discrimination complaints, and mandatory diversity training. It wasn't perfect, but it was something real. As I left the meeting, a neighbor I didn't know approached me. "I have a grandson your age," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "And I've been so worried about what he'll face when he buys a house. Seeing you stand up for yourself, it gives me hope." I didn't know what to say, so I just squeezed her hand and said I hope he finds a place where he belongs. Later that evening, I stood on my deck watching the sun set over the lake. For the first time since I'd moved into this house, it felt like it could actually be home. But I knew this fight wasn't over. It wasn't just about me anymore, it was about ensuring the next person, whoever they were, didn't have to fight for their right to belong. The phone buzzed, breaking the moment of peace. It was an email from my assistant. "The acquisition has closed. We're managing $5 billion now." But for the first time, that news didn't feel like the highlight of my day. The highlight was knowing that I had stood up for what was right, that I had fought not just for myself, but for a better future, for a better community. As the night wore on, I sat down at my kitchen table, opening my laptop. I had made my peace with the changes I'd set in motion, but now I was ready for the next step. I opened the Notes app on my phone and started writing. This time a letter to the legal aid organization where Lorraine was volunteering. I decided to match her donation $100,000 for victims of housing discrimination. The letter was simple, but it was my way of ensuring that justice wasn't just a luxury for the wealthy. It was something everyone should have access to. The next day, I felt the weight of everything I had been working for. Not just the house, not the car, not the money, but the peace of knowing I had made a difference. And that in the end was the real victory.